Joining me here on the Rich Eisen Show to discuss that and so much more is a guest who normally I would take it the wrong way when the guest on a previous show with a fill-in host says the fill-in host is 10 times better than the actual host. But when the fill-in host is my wife, it's all good. I agree. Peter King back here in the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Peter?
Mr. Schuster, how are you doing?
By the way, you're not the first to call me that. Charles Barkley called me that on the broadcast of Brady and Manning with Tiger and Phil, and that did not go very well over in well, it went over great in my house, but not especially with my kids. So you're not the first, Peter. It's all good. How are you? Thanks for doing that. I appreciate that.
That was a fun show that day with Susie.
Yeah,
so
she
thanks
felt
for having me do that.
No, and she felt the same way. So your comment about Russell Wilson being a pipe dream for the Bears certainly clanked around a little bit on the old Twitterverse machine. I'll give you the floor on what you mean by that, Peter.
I mean, if you're the Seattle Seahawks and you do end up trading Russell Wilson, tell me, what's the big attraction of trading him to the Chicago Bears? The 20th pick in the draft? I doubt it. Khalil Mack at 30? Maybe. That's a very, very interesting piece, knowing that Khalil Mack is still one of the best pass rushers in football. And John Schneider has been in an eternal search for one. But, Nick Foles, look, to me, every other team that Russell Wilson's agent, Mark Rodgers, named is more attractive than the Chicago Bears.
And they just don't have the capital for it. One would say, certainly like everybody else, and they also are in the wrong conference. If the Seahawks had their druthers, why is this even a conversation, though, Peter? I know there was a deep dive in The Athletic that kind of laid bare some of this stuff, but I want to give you the floor on that subject.
I really think, Rich, that for Russell Wilson to have gotten to this point, he is the ultimate team cheerleader. For those who don't know, he, at least until very recently, ended every interview he did and every press conference he did with "Go Hawks." And so, that went over very well with the 12s up in the Pacific Northwest. But I think what ends up happening after a while is that you go through the same thing over and over again. And I feel like Russell Wilson this is Russell Wilson standing at the outside of his, of his house and just basically saying, respect me, listen to me, allow me to be a part of things. And I think, Rich, this all comes down to, quite honestly, just the fact that he looks around the NFL and he sees other quarterbacks who have a lot more to do with what their teams are doing, both on offense and like in the game plan, than the power that he has. And I think he wants some of that.
Peter King here on the Rich Eisen Show. Why hasn't Drew Brees made an announcement yet, Peter?
It's very odd. I was told a week ago, don't pay any attention to this. It's not a story.
Okay.
And by somebody who I trust. So I'm going to err on the side of I have no earthly clue why it's taking so long, but I would be surprised if he plays in 2021. But it's a little bit weird, quite honestly, that he hasn't had his press conference and said, I'm not playing anymore. But I'm going to give it another week or so before I say, this is really, really weird.
Well, I mean, there's a new league year coming. We still don't know what the cap number is, to the point where tomorrow's franchise tag, I guess, line of demarcation in a way might be pushed. So we're going to have to get an answer. I mean, I think we know what the answer is. I think most of us would be surprised. The surprise would be obviously him saying, "I'm still thinking about it," and pulling a Favre in a way. But and then playing for the lower cap value and helping out the Saints on that, and sort of just giving a Via con Dios 2021 season where there'll be fans in the stands,
Right.
we expect. I mean, that I'm just literally trying to go back and forth on this to try and figure it out.
Yeah, I've thought about it quite a bit. A couple of weeks ago in my column, I said, "What are you waiting for?" In essence, what's the issue here? There's plenty of, that there was a lot of quarterback news for a while, and there's some quarterback news that is on the burner, but it's just on simmer right now with Watson and Wilson. But there's really nothing to me standing in the way of him saying something. I know for a while, I think he and his family are building a home in Hawaii, and he was out there with them for a couple of weeks doing some final things like that. So I know he's had some personal things, but I do think the other part of this is that I really get the feeling that the Saints want to move on. And, it's time. It's the first day of the rest of everybody's life. So let's all figure out what we're going to do as far as the quarterback position and as far as trying to make a really, really bad cap situation salvageable.
So what is their next step? Let's assume that your source who you trust and believe, and because they're well intentioned and well placed, that Brees, don't make anything of this. He's gonna be one of our colleagues with NBC Sports in short order. What do they do? Is it Jameis? Somebody else? What do you got for me?
My gut feeling is it'll be what it was, all except for Drew Brees. That it'll be Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill, and they'll compete. Probably Taysom wins the job, Winston wins the job. But if he struggles, if he gets the turnover bug, Peyton will play Taysom Hill. But again, I also think one of the things that I know that there's that Sean Payton will definitely be looking at this class of quarterbacks in the draft. And although you and I can sit here and say, hey, it's unlikely that any of them get down into the 20s where the Saints are, even Mac Jones. I mean, you never know. And they've never been afraid of making a trade. And I think if there's some quarterback in this draft that they think they have a chance to get, I would not be surprised. I mean, keep in mind, too, that, there's a lot of talk about Trey Lance, and there's such wide disparity of opinion on Trey Lance that probably more than any quarterback coming out this year, he's the one who really needs a year of a year to not play. And so that would be another one. I mean, are you going to take a quarterback this year who you think there's a good chance he's going to play very little in 2021? So that could end up working in the Saints' favor, but we'll see.
Peter King here on the Rich Eisen Show. What are the Patriots going to do? I'm so fascinated by this. Our friend Tom Curran kind of called out Belichick for not having a press conference since the third day of this year. That was an interesting column. I always like reading what he has to say from New England. What do you think they're going to do at the quarterback spot, Peter?
Rich, I just don't know. They've always been an organization that, Belichick often, he operates with the people in his organization on a need-to-know basis. And what that means is it doesn't matter how high in the organization you are, whether you're Josh McDaniels, the offensive coordinator, he's not. He doesn't really know, I don't think, whether Bill Belichick one day is going to call him up and say, hey, we decided we're going to trade for John Doe. We're trading for Marcus Mariota. So there's your new quarterback. But he is, I don't want to say he's autocratic because he isn't, but he's oftentimes not going to tell anybody what he's thinking until the decision has already been made. So my gut feeling is he has a pretty good idea of his options. I think for a while, quite honestly, I think they were seriously considering Marcus Mariota. I don't know whether they still are, but they're going to have to make a decision whether they want to take that 15th pick and maybe try to move up and get one of these guys. Because this is the first time in a long time that they've been even in half-decent position, to move around in the draft and maybe get a long-term quarterback. So we'll see. You would anticipate, you would think that with his relationship with Nick Saban that he would have some pretty good institutional knowledge about everything about Mac Jones.
Right.
So I've thought all along that might be an option for them at 15, but we'll see.
If they want to just be totally out of character, right, and hop all the way up to try and get into the Zach Wilson scenario, I'd love to hear the phone call, listening to him calling the Jets or the Dolphins for their draft choices. I can't even imagine, right?
Here's the point about that, okay? Like, when I talk to people around the league, because everybody knows that number 2 is Zach Wilson, and it's not absolute, but it's likely. Then, honestly, if you're there at 8 or 9, if you're Carolina or Denver, and everybody thinks that Carolina and Denver are very logical places for a quarterback, trading from, let's say, 8 or 9 to 1 would cost you next year's 1 and either this year's 2 or 3. So what is it going to cost the Patriots going from 15 to 2 or 15 to 3? Never mind that those are both teams in their division. And why in the world would Joe Douglas or Chris Greer want to hand Bill Belichick a quarterback for the next 12 years?
It'll never happen. Literally something very hot would have to freeze over for something like that to happen. And I'm not even going to ask about, what the Jets are thinking right now, because it really all depends on what might happen with Deshaun Watson or, there's no reason for the Jets to make a move right now.
I want to just interrupt you and just say
go.
that I will be surprised if the Jets are very aggressive with Deshaun Watson.
Why?
For a couple of reasons. Number one, I think that Joe Douglas sees his roster right now. He's worked with some really smart organizations. The Ravens, the Eagles, most notably, in my opinion. And he has watched general managers collect talent over the years. And, right now, the New York Jets are in position to basically fill their roster with a backbone that they currently do not have. To get an excellent offensive tackle. This is with or without taking a quarterback at 2. They're in position this year and next to really stockpile some really good talent to surround either Sam Darnold or a quarterback of the future with. And the people who know Joe Douglas are very dubious about whether he's going to trade the world to Houston for Deshaun Watson.
Peter King from NBC Sports and the Football Morning in America column, which is fantastic, right here on the Rich Eisen Show. You mentioned the Eagles being a smart organization, and I totally would agree with that. Although I am wondering what the hell is going on right now.
They're a very smart. They're an A student who just had a D- test, who just
right.
who just blew a test. But I still think they're a smart organization. It's just they're on a really bad run right now.
Well, I'm sure you saw what Mort was reporting, that Jeffrey Lurie has put his considerable thumb on the scale to say, I want Jalen Hurts to win this job. I don't want a quarterback competition. I want this guy. And the question is why with Nick Sirianni, not with the guy that you won a Super Bowl with? I mean, why entrust this crucial decision to somebody who's never done it before rather than the guy who knows the city and knows everything? And also, then what the hell happened in the fourth quarter of that game? Was it really tanking for draft position? And then why would you bring in a guy from the Colts organization that can fix Wentz technically, and then send Wentz to the guy that is from your organization now at the Colts to help fix Wentz? I just don't. None of this adds up, Peter. None of it. So I'm trying to figure it out.
When when the Eagles were interviewing, and when they were down to Nick Sirianni and Josh McDaniels for their final two candidates for that job, part of the interview was not, we are trading Carson Wentz. That because obviously that happened a month or so. There was time between the time they hired the coach and they made the Wentz decision. So I think that there were probably meetings and things said between the two sides, Wentz and his people, and then Howie Roseman and the people at the Eagles, that basically the Eagles viewed that it was an untenable situation. And look, I think that the Eagles, quite honestly, I think there's part of the organization, and I mean, obviously they're not still in shock, but at the end of this season, when they realized, my God, we might move on from the quarterback and the head coach who 8 months ago we were sure would be the quarterback and the head coach of our team for the next 5, 7, 10 years.
Right.
They were joined at the hip to be long-term. They were going to be Andy Reid and McNabb, and even better than that, and longer than that. And so I think there's still a little bit of a shock that it came to that point, both with the head coach and with Wentz. And I don't think it says very good things about Carson Wentz, quite honestly. I think that, when you get punched in the face, you need to get up and punch somebody back. And I just think that Wentz's response to significant adversity was to say, I want out, instead of, I'll show you. I mean, what does Tom Brady say in 2014 when they take Jimmy Garoppolo in the second round to be their quarterback of the future? You know what he says? I'll show you. This guy's not even getting off the bench. And for the most part, he didn't. And Brady, in the next 4 years, in the 4 years that Garoppolo was in New England, he won two Super Bowls and an MVP. And what did Aaron Rodgers do when they took Jordan Love? He said, I'll show you what's going to happen with Jordan Love. He's going to sit on the bench for the next 3.5 years, and then you're going to trade him just like the Patriots did with Garoppolo. But, I'm just telling you, I don't understand why you've been hurt twice early in your career. You're Carson Wentz. You've been hurt twice. And your team no longer has the guy who puts on the Superman cape to go save the season in Nick Foles. You've got Nate Sudfeld and Josh McCown and whoever. But with the Philadelphia Eagles, I'll argue this till the day I die. The backup quarterback, when Carson Wentz is your starter, the backup quarterback is a top 10 most important player on your team. You need a quarterback who can come in and save your season if, again, Carson Wentz goes down with an injury. And I do not understand anybody thinking, well, they drafted Jalen Hurts to be their quarterback. They never drafted him to be their quarterback over Carson Wentz. Not until Carson Wentz talked his way out of town.
And just putting it all together, Peter, before I let you go here, I can't help but think this, just putting some connective tissue together, right? That we've all been, I don't want to say mort's been used, okay, but I just did by saying I don't want to say it. But we've all been, given information to put out there, and we all think this is a bona fide piece of information that should be put out there. I can't help but think, let's put it out there, make it think like Jalen's our guy, but then call our old friend Joe Douglas for Zach Wilson, number 2 overall, and pull the trigger on that. And that's the way that they're going to actually move forward in Philadelphia, because you're sitting here wondering what's the connective tissue that you can call up Joe Douglas. Obviously, anybody has his number, and he'll take the highest offer. But maybe that's the way they go about it, right? I just don't. I don't know.
It could be because, look, I wrote about it last week. I wrote about Zach Wilson You had his coach on. He's a really, really intriguing player, and he's gonna get picked very high. And there are people right now in the NFL who really believe in Zach Wilson, and they believe in him as a year one starter in the NFL. Now, whether Philadelphia believes that and whether they will offer the best, here's a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
If you're Joe Douglas, do you go down because you're going to have multiple opportunities to go down? Do you ignore everything and take the guy who you think is going to be your long-term guy, get a 2 for Sam Darnold, and just move on with still a treasure trove of picks that still include 2 ones this year, 2 ones next year?
Well, let me answer that question for you, Peter. If you like a quarterback other than Wilson, and you believe in somebody other than Zach Wilson, and then you move down to 9, and you could take down that guy down at 9. Everything you're hearing is that there's no kid from Ohio State who can rush the passer generationally available at number 2, which has been that spot in recent days.
There isn't a generational defensive player in this draft,
right?
Not even close
at all. So if you could take somebody's picks, you don't go any further down than 9. Go and use that. You still have a first rounder as well. You could get somebody else for Darnold on the second night of the draft, just like the Cardinals did for Josh Rosen, and play it that way. I mean, you could absolutely play it that way if you're the Jets.
You could do it. I mean, look, the Jets. I think the Jets are in a really enviable position because what if?
Mm-hmm.
What if they stay with Darnold for 1 year? Forget everybody said, well, then you'd have to worry about the 5th-year option. They're not exercising the 5th-year option. It would be foolhardy. You're not doing that. All you're doing, if you keep Sam Darnold, is you're giving him 1 year to prove himself. And then if you got to pay him after that 1 year, you figure out a way. But if you keep Sam Darnold and he's your quarterback this year, the Jets, under almost any circumstance, would have 3 ones next year. One of them would be their own one, which would probably be a darn good one. And so you would have an opportunity next year, and everybody says, well, the quarterback crop's a lot better this year. Look, that is such a silly way to look at it because you have no idea who's coming out next year. And 1 year ago today, Zach Wilson was in a 3-person competition for the starting job at Brigham Young after having a horrible end to his 2019 season. So no one knows what the draft is going to look like at any position, never mind quarterback next year. So I still think that part of what Joe Douglas can do is he can say in his building, look, Sam Darnold's never had anything close to a fair chance. Let's give him a fair chance. Let's draft let's trade down to number 8 and take the Northwestern tackle. And now we got 2 bookend tackles. And now it's a fair fight for Sam Darnold.
Peter, you're the man. This is great. Let's do this a heck of a lot more often. The news, as we know, is going to just start going off the charts. Appreciate the time, as always. Thank you.
Okay, Rich, have a great day.
That's Peter King, at Peter_King. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.